The Pacific War was supposed to be clean. That was the promise. High-altitude bombers. Perfect calculations. Precision bombing so accurate it would make navies obsolete. At least, that's what the manuals said. Asterisk, on a sticky morning in early 1942. That fantasy shattered over the Solomon Sea. Asterisk, at exactly 9:17 a.m. A formation of American heavy bombers reached their bombing altitude. 20,000 feet above the water. It was textbook perfection. The pilots leveled off. The bombardiers leaned forward, faces pressed into the eyepieces of their secret weapon, the Norden bomb sight. A device so protected that crews were ordered to destroy it rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Asterisk below them. Japanese destroyers sliced through the ocean like steel predators. Fast, disciplined, unafraid. Asterisk. The Americans trusted the math. Asterisk wind drift calculated. Speed corrected. Release toggles flipped. The bombs fell. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Just silence and anticipation. 40 seconds felt like an eternity. Every crew expected to see fire blossom across the convoy. Asterisk instead, the ocean exploded. In the wrong places, asterisk white pillars of water erupted harmlessly hundreds of yards away from the ships. Not a single hit. Not even close. Asterisk the Japanese destroyers didn't panic. They didn't scatter. They barely reacted. Asterisk their captains simply turned their helms slightly, adjusted course, and watched millions of dollars of American explosives vanish into the Pacific. It wasn't a fluke. It happened again. And again. And again. Asterisk high-altitude precision bombing him, America's proud doctrine, was failing catastrophically. Against moving naval targets, the physics were brutal. A bomb dropped from 20,000 feet takes nearly a minute to fall. In that time, a destroyer could move half a mile. The Japanese knew this. They exploited it. They mocked it. While American air crews returned to bases in New Guinea, exhausted and furious, Japanese destroyers ran supply missions with impunity. Troops, ammunition, fuel, night after night. The Tokyo Express delivered everything the front needed. Asterisk, this was the nightmare awaiting. General George Kenney. Asterisk, when Kenney arrived to take command of Allied air forces in the Southwest Pacific, he didn't find a proud fighting force. He found an air arm on the verge of collapse. Asterisk, aircraft were grounded for lack of spare parts. Mechanics scavenged wrecks just to keep engines running. Pilots were flying missions they knew wouldn't work. Asterisk, Kenney didn't look like a general. He spoke like a dock worker and walked like a man itching for a fight. He had no patience for theory or tradition. He looked at the bombing reports and threw them away to him. Trying to hit a destroyer from 20,000 feet was insanity. It was like standing on a skyscraper and trying to drop a coin to a coffee cup strapped to a sprinting animal. Asterisk, the enemy wasn't stupid. They weren't static targets. They adapted. Kenney understood something critical. If you want to kill ships, you have to get close. Very close. Low enough to smell the salt. Low enough to see faces. Asterisk machine guns wouldn't cut it. Rifle caliber fire bounced off warship hulls. Even heavy machine guns were suppressive at best. They blinded crews. Scared gunners, but they didn't sink steel. Asterisk Kenney needed punch, real punch, artillery. And then he saw it. The B-25 Mitchell. Asterisk A. Rugged. Twin-engine medium bomber. Not elegant, not fast, but strong. Overbuilt. Forgiving. The kind of aircraft that survived abuse. Asterisk and nearby. Sitting quietly on airfields and depots was something never meant to fly. A 75mm field gun. A weapon designed to smash bunkers, to rip through armor, to deliver brute force destruction. The idea that followed was madness. Mount the gun. Inside the airplane, asterisk, not under it. Not externally, inside the nose. Engineers nearly laughed him out of the room. Asterisk, the gun weighed nearly half a ton. The recoil was violent enough to shove tanks backward. In an aircraft, that force had nowhere to go. Asterisk calculations were run. Stress charts filled with red warnings. Asterisk, they told Kenny the recoil would shear rivets, snap frames, shatter cockpits, and stall the aircraft midair. They said the plane would fall out of the sky. Kenny didn't argue the math. He rejected the premise. He had watched aircraft patched with scrap metal continue flying. He had seen planes absorb damage far beyond design limits. Asterisk, the war wasn't being fought in laboratories. It was being fought in jungles and salt air. He gave the order. Build it. The engineers didn't call it innovation. They called it insanity. To them, aircraft were equations. Delicate balances of lift, thrust, and weight. The idea of bolting artillery into an airplane violated everything. They believed about flight. Asterisk, but General Kenny wasn't. Asking, he was commanding. The B-25's iconic glass nose designed for bombardiers and precision optics was ripped away. In its place, a blunt metal snout was welded on. Ugly, brutal, purpose-built. Asterisk. Inside that nose sat the M475mm cannon. Asterisk, the gun dominated the aircraft. Its breech loomed inches from the pilot. Hydraulic recoil systems filled the forward compartment. Every ounce of weight pushed the center of gravity dangerously forward. Asterisk to compensate. Mechanics added lead ballast into the tail. Not elegant counterweights. Just slabs of lead bolted into the rear. It worked barely. Entire crew positions vanished. No navigator. No bombardier. Their jobs were obsolete. In their place stood a new role. The cannoneer, asterisk, a man whose job was to load 15-pound artillery shells into a gun while flying at low altitude, under fire, inches from the pilot's knees. Asterisk, there was no automation. No safety buffer. Asterisk, just muscle, timing, and nerve. Asterisk, when the first modified aircraft taxied, it handled terribly, heavy, sluggish, reluctant to climb. Pilots joked it flew like a truck with wings. Asterisk, then came the moment everyone feared. Asterisk. Live fire. Asterisk, the aircraft lined up on a remote reef. Engines roared. The cannoneer rammed the shell home. The pilot squeezed the trigger. The airplane slammed backward in midair. Asterisk, smoke flooded the cockpit. The airframe shuddered violently. Asterisk, then. Silence. The wings were still attached. The reef below erupted. It worked, against all predictions. The aircraft survived. The impossible had become real. But surviving a test shot was one thing. Asterisk, flying straight at a warship was another. The new gunship required a new kind of pilot. Asterisk bombers flew steady, predictable, passive. This aircraft demanded aggression. The cannon was fixed forward. To aim it, the pilot aimed the entire plane. No corrections. No second chances. Attack runs became games of chicken. Dive, stabilize, ignore the flak. Hold steady. Fire. The margin for error was razor thin. Early missions targeted barges. Small supply vessels hugging coastlines. The results were devastating. Asterisk, where bombs punched holes. Shells erased targets. Asterisk barges vanished in explosions of wood, fuel, and smoke. Confidence grew. Then came the real test. Asterisk Japanese destroyers. Fast-armed, veteran crews. They expected torpedo planes. Dive bombers. High-altitude bombers. They did not expect artillery. When the B-25s came in low, 50 feet above the waves, the Japanese captains reacted by doctrine. Turn bow on. Minimize profile. That decision sealed their fate. Because the Americans weren't dropping torpedoes. They were charging head-on. Machine guns raked decks. Bridges shattered. Gunners dove for cover. Then the cannon fired. The shell didn't bounce. Asterisk. It punched through steel and exploded inside. Asterisk boilers ruptured. Power failed. Steering vanished. A destroyer crippled by a single airplane. The sky had become lethal. The Tokyo Express was no longer safe. The destruction of that first destroyer wasn't just a victory, it was a revelation. For decades, naval warfare had followed rigid rules. Big ships fought big ships. Aircraft harassed, scouted, and softened targets, but they did not hunt destroyers head-on. That belonged to battleships, cruisers, and submarines. The B-25 shattered that hierarchy. When the gunship squadrons returned to base, their aircraft looked ruined. Soot-blackened noses, blistered paint, brass shell casings rolling across the cockpit floor. But the crews were alive, and something more dangerous. They were confident. Gun camera footage removed all doubt. Grainy film showed shells striking holes, explosions blooming inside ships, destroyers slowing, stopping, burning. General Kenny knew exactly what this meant. He sent the footage back to the United States. Asterisk. Not with a report. With a message. Build more. Asterisk factories that once resisted now rushed production. The B to 5G was followed by the H model. More guns, more armor. More brutality, the aircraft evolved from bomber into predator. For Japanese captains, daylight became terrifying. The sea once open and free became a trap. Convoys hid in shadows. Speed no longer guaranteed safety. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea proved it. Low-level attacks. Skip bombing. Suppressive fire. Complete annihilation of a reinforcement fleet. The Pacific had changed forever. But the cannon's reign was short. Asterisk technology marched forward. Rockets arrived, easier, lighter, deadlier. A pilot could fire a salvo with a button press. Asterisk. 75mm gun became obsolete, but its legacy didn't. Years later, in Vietnam, old cargo planes were armed and sent to orbit battlefields. Then came the AC-130 with cannons and howitzers firing sideways from the sky, a flying battleship. Every shot fired traced its lineage back to those B-25s, asterisk. To the men who ignored manuals, asterisk to the general, who refused to accept failure. Asterisk history remembers innovation as clean and calculated. Asterisk, but sometimes innovation is desperate. Sometimes it's loud, ugly, and terrifying. Sometimes it's just a big gun bolted into a plane, aimed straight at the impossible.